Thanks. Next slide.
Can I add something too real quick
Yeah.
before we go to Troy? So that was just a reminder. That was just simply taking the raw feedback that we received from the group during the breakout sessions in the first meeting. And so we wanted to have Troy kind of take a look at that and analyze and, kind of give us feedback on the current processes that are being used so that we can find out, kind of identify where there might be, clarifications that need to be made or additional information that needs to be shared. So that's why we wanted to bring Troy in for this.
So ports, I didn't notice that anyone mentioned 8826 at all. And so I wanted to highlight the fact that you have two ways of getting into the derelict vessel removal account. And that is, one is 8826, and that's for tenant vessels only. So if you have a tenant that stops paying, then you can use 8826. And the law has changed recently. It used to be a 90-day notice. It's now 45 days. So your process has went from 100 days down to about 55 days. So the other avenue is obviously 79.100. So if it's a tenant, you have two ways to go through that. You have to go through 8826 for tenants, derelict or abandoned vessels that show up on your transitory dock. Those are 79.100. Okay, and the gold star is obviously, don't change that process. That's good. Okay. Next slide. Yes.
How is 8826 different from 5308 other than the time frame? Because 5308 is what we've been using for tenant vessels.
Yeah, sorry, 5308 is for ports, 8826 is for private
8826
marines.
is private.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
8826 has not changed.
Okay.
It's 5308 that has changed. 5308 has gone from 90-day process to a 45-day process. So ports need to use the 5308 for tenant vessels. That's a mistake up there. Apologize for that. But yeah, it's about a 55-day process now. The private mortgage statutes did not change. So when the ports went to the legislature, they only changed the port requirement. They didn't change the private marina requirement, which is still 90 days. Okay, next slide. Law enforcement, get a gold star for working with DNR. There's a lot on that slide so under 79.100, law enforcement agencies are considered authorized public entities. It's kind of a catch there though, because they're also enforcing the laws and stuff like that. So as far as the tribal vessels go, they do have jurisdiction to handle those vessels. I understand it might be a little tricky dealing with tribal members and stuff like that. So if you have a vessel that's tribal and it's causing a problem, contact us. Because if you don't want to take custody of it, then we can go ahead and work with you to gain custody of it. So as long as it's in the waters of the state, we have jurisdiction over those vessels. It's only when it's on tribal lands that we don't have jurisdiction. That's federal level, and you'd have to go through the U.S. Marshals or get permission from the tribal council. Next slide. Is the Department of Fish and Wildlife here today? I don't think so. Quickly, what I really wanted to tell them was that they can act as an authorized public entity because the statute clearly states that Fish and Wildlife is an authorized public entity. So they can use 79.100. That's important because they have a lot of boat launches and stuff that boats get abandoned at. They can also use the master contract through the Department of Enterprise Services to hire contractors to go out there and remove them. Next slide. So public health, I really want to get some of that $500 vouchers to remove some of these boats from them. That would help out a lot, really. But I think they're separate from the county. Is that what we established is they're separate from the county. And because of that, they're not an authorized public entity. And so they would have to go through a county representative. But they can also use the master contract through Department of Enterprise Services, as long as, I think everyone in here can use it. So, next slide. So law enforcement, again, there was so much on here that I made new slides. Okay, so next slide. So what I want to do is first, who is responsible for the removal of these vessels? The owner is always responsible for the removal of these vessels, and we encourage you to try and contact them to encourage responsible vessel ownership. Obviously, that doesn't always work. And so the next course in 79.100 is an authorized public entity. And who's an authorized public entity? It clearly states that the DFW, state parks, Parks and Recreation Commissions, port districts, cities, towns, counties. Those are all authorized public entities along with DNR. If you're not on that list, then you're not an authorized public entity. And then you'd have to contact someone who would be an authorized public entity. Next slide. So this is the important part here. Everyone wants to get paid to remove these vessels, right? So there's a couple of ways to get there. As an authorized public entity, you can use 79.100 for abandoned and derelict vessels. If it's not abandoned or derelict, meaning it was a tenant that stopped paying, then you have to use 5308. So the port districts have two avenues to go in order to gain access to the derelict vessel removal account. And that's because there's two different situations that they could deal with. So the second one there is the vessel turn-in program. That is for private marinas and private citizens. So if you have a tenant that no longer wants their boat, hand them a flyer for the vessel turn-in program. We'll come and get it and destroy it for them. That's the easiest way for private marinas to gain access to it, is they have to go through 8826. And that's the same thing the ports do. It's the same notices and stuff like that, except they didn't change their notice requirements. So it's still a 90-day process for private marinas. So they can go through that process. If it doesn't sell at auction, they'll gain ownership of it 10 days later. They can turn it into the vessel turn-in program as a vessel owner. Now, one note on the auctions for both ports and private marinas. We recommend that you set a minimum bid on those vessels, primarily what they owe you, back mortgage, fees or anything else like that. Set that minimum bid, please. And the reason why is we want to encourage the next person to be responsible. We don't want to sell these vessels for $1 or $10 or something like that. They're just going to go out, strip it of all of its value and anchor it on state-owned aquatic lands, and it's going to be a problem for us eventually. Because if you don't sell it because you set the minimum bid at, I don't know, $500 or something like that, and it doesn't sell, you can destroy it and get reimbursed for all of your costs for that deconstruction. Okay, so first option that our program does is we look to deconstruct vessels, unless it's just immaculate, and then we'll sell it. But then we put a lot of stipulations on that, the sale of that vessel. So multiple ways to gain access to the derelict vessel removal account. If you have a project that you want to start through this process, contact us first. We can bookmark those funds, meaning we'll set those funds aside for you up to a certain amount, and then you can go ahead and do your project and then submit for reimbursement, and you're guaranteed up to that bookmark for those funds. When we start getting towards the end of the biennium, the account gets a little low and we can't always pay authorized public entities for reimbursements. So if you want the guarantee, talk to us before you start the project and we'll bookmark it. Next slide. The definitions. So 79.100, there's only two ways to gain access to the custody process and then reimbursement. And that is the vessel has to meet the definition of abandoned, and the definition of derelict. So a couple of things about derelict. First off, you have to know who the owner is and they have to exert control over the vessel. And what's that mean? Do they have the ability to hire a tow company to go out there and remove the vessel? So anyone who's not in a coma pretty much can exert control over their vessel, but you have to know who it is. Otherwise, you can't name it derelict. Unfortunately, you can name it abandoned, but that takes 30 days. But derelict is a lot quicker because if it's in violation of your clearly established rules for your facility, then it's derelict, as long as you know who the owner is. So abandoned takes minimum 30 days, has to be out there, or 90 days in any 365-day period. You don't have to know who the owner is for abandoned, but you do for derelict. Okay. I think I beat that horse enough. Next slide. So the custody process for 79.100 has changed recently. We've gotten rid of a couple of requirements and we've shortened the time period. So to gain custody, you have to post the notice, you have to mail a notice, put it on our website, and then you have to wait the 15 days. At the 15-day mark, you do have the legal authority to do whatever you want with that vessel. However, there is another 30 days that the owner can appeal that process. And I just learned that an authorized public entity lost their appeal because they destroyed the boat before the deadline for the appeal. So it's a business decision that I would recommend you talk to your risk managers about whether you want to destroy the boat before the appeal period ends or after. But the custody process is 15 days. So there is a provision within 79.100 for emergency temporary possession. What does that look like? If it's sinking, if it's leaking, if it's going to harm the environment or human safety, you can immediately take possession of the vessel, make it safe, and then go through the custody process. So you can drag it on shore, you can put it in your boatyard, stuff like that, or you can pump the water off of it and put it back on anchor. So next slide. Custody process under 5308 and 8826. Like I said, the custody process is about notices. The first one is you're going to have to tell them that they owe you money. When they don't respond, then you can go through the announcements for the auction. And then after all your notices and stuff is done and you go through the auction, 10 days after the auction is when you legally gain ownership of the vessel if it doesn't sell at auction. And I encourage that minimum bid there so that we can get rid of all of these derelict boats. I don't like kicking the can down the road for the next person to deal with it. So I'd prefer just to pay you guys to destroy them. So again, 5308 is 55 days and 8826 is 100 days. And the reason why is you have to have a 90-day notice. And then 10 days after that is when you gain legal ownership. So you can destroy it. So I recommend to both private and public ports that as soon as they miss a payment, post it. That'll minimize the number of months that it has to sit in your marina where you're not gaining any funds. It'll limit your losses. Next slide. So any questions about what I just discussed? The reason why I wanted to go through this is because everyone in this room had a different process. And the easiest way to do this, give us a call as soon as you have a problem vessel and we'll walk you through it. And once you do it a couple of times, it's going to be automatic. There's a few faces in here that we've been in communication with quite often. And I'm pretty sure that they could give this presentation by now.
A question online from Caitlin Newman.
Hi, this is a question maybe for Troy and Thomas Jury from KPHD. I saw on the slides that the health district is giving out $500 vouchers. Thomas, I just wanted to clarify, are those are disposal vouchers?
No, it's a different set of vouchers from KPHD.
Oh, okay. Is that paid for through the solid waste program or some other?
Through the solid waste program, yes.
Oh, okay. Very cool. And then Troy, you said something about like you wish you could have those $500 vouchers. Is that, just reading between the lines, is that because the derelict vessel account is lacking in funding? Or I guess I'm just wondering why you said that comment.
Yes, I'm looking for funding all the time.
Okay.
Because right now we have over 300 vessels on our vessel of concern list. And we are running out of funds really fast. And part of the
Gotcha.
problem is we've had a few large vessels this biennium come into our program. One of them was the Pacific Producer down in Tacoma. It was leaking ammonia. And while they were dealing with that, it started leaking 500 gallons a day of water. And it was going to sink on top of a EPA hazardous waste cap that was in the waterway. And we were the landowners, so we were gonna have to pay either way. So we had to take custody of it. It's 170 feet long. And the estimated deconstruction cost is $3 million. Yeah. So any $500 that you feel like giving me, I will take, because that $500 will take care of at least a V-tip turn-in for disposal at a landfill or something like that. And that helps us. Every little bit helps us. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions online or in the room for Troy? No. Comments, reflections, feedback on the process documented? Nope. All right.